You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Franco Luna Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka News. In this episode,
Yung entry-level positions namin especially for yung nasa probinsya would be salary grade 9 and kailangan may eligibility sila. So wala po nag-a-apply because salary grade 9 is just around 21,000 pesos.
let's talk about how much our government engineers are earning.
Kailangan po namin yung mga engineers kasi kailangan marunong sa, like, we have to train them for interpreting our seismic data and wala pong
Tanong ko
nag-a-apply.
si Secretary.
You just heard FIVOC's Director Teresito Bacolcol. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or FIVOX, is the government agency responsible for monitoring and responding to volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. But FIVOX is facing a staffing shortage. According to Bacolcol, the agency has 43 unfilled positions, and one of the main reasons is the low salaries. Speaking to senators at a budget hearing, Science and Technology Secretary Renato Solidum said that low entry-level salaries discourage young engineers from working in government.
Ang problema po kasi, Senator, yung requirement doon sa position na yan, kunyari engineer, geologist, tapos may ilang years na experience, 1 year experience. So hindi ka makahire ng fresh graduate dyan. Tapos hihingi ka ng ganong requirement, tapos ang sweldo mo 21,000. Maghanap na lang sila trabaho sa iba.
And if you're the breadwinner of your family, that's barely enough.
Yung range of salary between the engineers way back from the last admin up to now, parang virtually di siya nagbago. In a sense that most businesses or entities, naghanap lang sila nung minimum competencies for entry-level engineers. Napapasok to sa range na yun.
Yan naman si Jam Montalban. He's Public Information Officer of the Pro People Engineers and Leaders, or PROPEL. I asked him how long it would take for young engineering students to get a return on their investment for all the years in school.
Sa ngayon, nagre-range na siya around 60 to 80,000 pesos per sem. And it would usually take around 5 years. Not to mention if there are challenges na may encounter ng estudyante, it would take another year or another 2 years in additional. Masasabi natin na at least by siguro around 15 to 20 years yung balik.
It is what it is, but it's also why we have engineers and geologists leaving the country. According to a report by globaleconomy.com, the Philippine Brain Drain Index hit the 5.1 mark in 2022, which points to a, quote, medium-level threat to the country's economy and welfare. Per government data from 1998 to 2011, engineers made up 28% of migrant Filipino workers in science and technology. That number is only second to nurses and midwives, who made up almost a sixth of Filipino professionals abroad. That's because even if you are able to find a job, the working conditions just aren't the best.
Sa government, while there's opportunity for regularization, napapansin namin na medyo minimal yung opportunity para doon. Yung mga job orders, yung mga non-plantilla work na kung i-interpret natin siya, medyo contract-based. So, there's a minimum assurance na mayroong mariregular na engineer or mayroong mariregular na na engineering professional doon sa prescribed work niya sa government. While there are cases of engineers working beyond 40 hours per week as prescribed by our labor code, sinusunod pa rin naman ng government yung 40-hour work scheme. Minsan may overtime, minsan meron tayong tinatawag na OTY, so overtime na thank you, ibig sabihin, nag-work ka na overtime yun, pero di siya compensated.
As you heard, the FIVOC said it needs more employees to interpret seismic data. The institute analyzes seismic data to monitor and assess earthquakes, volcanic activity, and other geohazards in the Philippines. That data is collected by a network of stations throughout the country, which measure the ground motion caused by earthquakes and other seismic events. The data is then transmitted to FIVOC's headquarters, where it's assessed by seismologists. Ibig sabihin, dahil may brain drain tayo, apektado rin ang taong bayan.
It might lead to necessary confusion at the same time, disruption of yung appropriate response dun sa pwedeng kahantungan, destruction and loss of life in the environment. So, importante yung pangalagaan din yun, no? Yung pangangailangan din ng mga engineers and other professionals natin on that kind of sector. Kasi sila yun sila yung pinagdedependehan natin for that kind of information kung ano yung magiging response natin sa anumang disaster, anumang sakuna na maaaring dumating in the near future.
We're pausing for a quick break now. When we return, what can the government do about brain drain in engineering?
The worst thing that I could look upon before nung lumipat ako sa private sector is yung workload. Siguro I think it was around just a few weeks after my first day yun. Ibinigay na sa akin lahat ng workload na iniwan nung previous engineer. When I reviewed the workload it's really composed of a pile load of technical challenges na kailangan mong i-address. So, you have no choice but to slowly address those challenges. So, it came to the extent na yun, na nag-work ako ng ginagabi na, hinahating gabi na ako ng uwi. Then, kinabukasan, papasok na naman. So, that kind of environment. I mean, no, nasa, pagkalipat ko lang after ng government.
Again, that was engineer Jamon Talban of Pro People Engineers and Leaders. I was asking him about what his engineering journey looked like early on when he worked in the environment sector for a local government unit. It's not just about recruiting. All this is making it difficult for FIVOLCs and other government agencies to retain qualified engineers. And not having enough personnel would affect how the government responds to natural disasters and other emergencies.
Wala tayong engineer na nakatuon or pwede magbigay ng kanyang services dun sa particular sa sector na hinahanap ng mga tao. So, sa energy, syempre, bagamat meron tayong mga resources for energy utilization, yung technical capacity, generally, kinukuha pa rin siya abroad. So, most especially dun sa power generation. Kung wala man tayong engineer, konti lang yung mga engineers dito na may technical capacity to manage, sustain, and to provide ample services for our generator sectors and entities. Ganon din sa iba pang utilities like sa tubig, transportation, telecom, etc. So, minimal yung engineers na nagpe-perform on those industries kasi reflective siya ng nung kawalan ng serbisyo dun sa mga tao. So, kung walang mga engineer or walang ample amount of engineers to conduct or to sustain or to manage these kinds of utilities, magkakaroon ng kakulangan din dun sa services na ihahandog mo dun sa mga tao.
For Ja, the low salaries of government engineers is a serious problem that needs to be addressed ASAP. It's important for the government to invest in its engineers so they can continue to serve and protect the Filipino people. Because how long are we going to depend on our engineers' nationalism and good hearts when low compensation, uncompetitive benefits, and lack of long-term opportunities drive them away?
Sadly, there's no sufficient development and capacity and technical development for engineers locally. So, kung meron man, sobrang limited lang. At dahil na-exacerbate pa siya nung mababang sahod, mababang compensation, at mababang benefits, lalalat yun, mas tumataas yung living expenses. Yan, na-exacerbate yung chance for engineers to look for opportunities abroad. Another thing is that we can see na most engineers or most engineering applications here in the Philippines are directly service-oriented. So, sa construction, sa manufacturing, or at least yung majority ng engineering workforce here in the Philippines ay nakatuon sa service orientation, ranging for public utilities, kuryente, tubig, manufacturing.
In closing, I asked Ja this question. Despite all these challenges, what makes a Filipino engineer stay in the Philippines? This is what he had to say.
There's this sense of responsibility pa rin for engineers na to work here as a form of serving its duty in addressing the needs of the Filipino people. So I believe may mga engineers pa rin naman na tumitingin sa ganun.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Freddy Blanco. Our Teka Teka News executive producer is Jill Caro, and our senior editor is Veronica Oye. If you found this episode useful, share it with a friend. Help Teka Teka News reach more people and keep the show going. Thanks for listening.